Hello, my name is Carrie Brown and I am with the Central Mississippi Regional Library System. Today I'm going to be reading to you chapters 1 and 2 of Calendar Mysteries, November Night. Written by Ron Roy, illustrated by John Stephen Gurney, published by Random House, New York. Chapter 1. Spying on the Neighbors. On the Sunday before Thanksgiving, Bradley Pinto walked into his bedroom. His twin brother Brian was kneeling in front of the window. He was peering through binoculars. "What are you doing?" Bradley asked. "Nothing," Brian said. "Yes, you are," Bradley said. "You're spying on the new neighbors again." "I'm not exactly spying," Brian said. "I'm just checking them out." Bradley flopped down on his bed. "Mom and Dad gave us the binoculars so we could learn about birds and nature stuff," he said. "Looking at people is more fun," Brian said. "And I am learning about nature. I saw a hawk in the tree." Bradley knelt next to his brother. He looked at the brand new fence that surrounded the neighbor's yard. A tall dead tree stood in the middle of the backyard. Before the new neighbors moved in, the twins used to play inside the tree's hollow trunk. The tree trunk was so big that Bradley and Brian couldn't stretch their arms around it. Sometimes they would hide in the trunk from their older brother Josh. Other times, the twins and their friends, Nate and Lucy, would sit inside and pretend they were lost in the woods. Or they'd pretend to be cave people hiding from ferocious animals. Bradley had lined the hollow trunk with hay from Polly the pony's stall to make it softer to sit on. Brian had invented a game called Troll in the Hole. He would hide inside the tree trunk wearing a scary Halloween mask. Bradley, Nate, and Lucy would walk past, and Brian would jump out, yelling, "Troll is hungry! Troll is going to eat you!" Nate would yell, "Don't eat me, Mr. Troll! I taste like rotten eggs!" Bradley would yell, "Don't eat me, Mr. Troll! I taste like dirty socks!" Lucy would just run away laughing. But last week, a moving van had shown up. Workers unloaded furniture and boxes. New neighbors moved in. Bradley's mom told the twins the neighbors were Mr. and Mrs. Sargent. A few days later, a trunk carrying lumber drove into the driveway. Two men spent a whole day building a tall wood fence around the neighbor's yard with slats so close together that the kids couldn't see through it. There was a wide gate so the Sargents could drive their car inside the fence. Now the kids couldn't get into the yard. They couldn't play Troll in the Hole. They couldn't just look at their favorite little tree through the binoculars. "Look, there they are!" Brian cried suddenly. On the other side of the fence were a man and woman. They had gray hair and wore sweaters and jeans. The man had on a red baseball cap. A gray ponytail stuck out the back. They stood and stared up at the old dead tree. "Maybe they're going to cut the tree down," Bradley said. "They better not," Brian wailed. "What about my money?" "What money?" Bradley asked. Brian picked up his piggy bank and shook it. The bank was empty. "Every week I hide my allowance money in a jar. I put the jar inside the old tree under the hay." Bradley's eyes got wide. "Why do you hide your money?" he asked. "So Josh won't get it," Brian said. "He used to sneak in here and borrow money from my bank. Only he forgot to pay it back." They both looked out the window. "What if the new neighbors find the jar?" Brian asked. "There's $20.37 in it." "Well, what about my flashlight?" Brian asked. "What about it?" Brian said. "The last time we were playing inside the tree, I left my special flashlight under the hay," Bradley said. "The one with little bats on the handle that glow in the dark." Just then, something huge, black, and hairy bolted out of the neighbor's back door. It charged across the yard toward the man and woman. "Oh my gosh, a bear is attacking Mr. and Mrs. Sargent," Brian said. The giant hairy thing stood on its hind legs and began licking Mrs. Sargent's face. Bradley gulped. "It's just a really big dog," he said. "I guess that's why they built the fence." The boy's basset hound pal wandered into the room. He padded over to the window and put his front paws on the sill. When he saw the neighbor's dog, he let out a low growl. Brian patted Pal on the head. "Don't worry, boy," he said. "We'll protect you." Pal ran and hid under Bradley's bed. The boys watched the neighbors walk into their garage. They came out lugging a long ladder. They leaned the ladder against the tree. Mr. Sargent climbed up into the tree. He unclipped a tape measure from his belt and measured the lowest branches. Mrs. Sargent wrote something on a clip pad. Then she unrolled a big sheet of paper. She spread it out on the ground and put rocks on the corners. Her husband came down, and they got on their knees and studied the unrolled paper. Mrs. Sargent wrote more things on her pad. Brian trained the binoculars onto the paper. "It's all funny drawings," he said. "Grandpa had pictures like that when he built his boat, remember?" "Do you think they're going to build a boat?" Bradley asked. "I don't care what they build as long as they don't cut our tree down." It's not our tree," Bradley said. "It's their tree now." The boys watched the neighbors walk all around the tree. Mr. Sargent took more measurements. Mrs. Sargent wrote more things on her pad. Mr. Sargent put his head inside the hollow part of the tree. He crawled inside, then came out again. He said something to his wife, and they both laughed. They went back to the pictures on the roll of paper. They scratched their heads. "Don't look under the hay," Bradley whispered. Mr. Sargent went into the house and came out with 2 mugs. Bradley could see the steam rising. The neighbors sipped from their mugs and stared at their tree. They sat on the ground and leaned against the trunk. The twins heard their mother's voice from downstairs. "Supper, you two," she called, "and wash your hands, please." Chapter 2. Bradley's Nightmare. "You guys were pretty quiet in your room," their father said. "Were you hatching some evil plan?" He grinned. "No, but we think the new neighbors are going to build something in their backyard," Bradley said. "They might cut the tree down." "How do you know?" their mother asked. She passed a plate full of fried chicken. "Brian is spying on them with the binoculars," Bradley said. "Mr. and Mrs. Sargent are from Florida," the boy's father said, passing the green beans to Josh. "A lot of people in Florida have swimming pools in their yards. Maybe the Sargents are going to put in a swimming pool." "Sweet," Josh said. "They could hire me to keep it clean." "I bet they're going to plant a vegetable garden," Mrs. Pinto said. "I think Martha Sargent misses her garden in Florida." "Mom, it's almost Thanksgiving," Bradley said. "Why would she plant a garden now?" "You're right, honey," his mom said. "I meant in the springtime." "Good. Maybe she'll give us some of her vegetables," Mr. Pinto said. "No way," Josh said. "We don't need more vegetables in this house. Mom makes us eat too many already. One of these days, I'm going to turn green." "Like Kermit the Frog," Bradley said, grinning at Josh. "I should invite them over for a meal," their mother said. "I think Martha and Ralph miss their kids and grandkids." "Just don't invite their dog," Josh said. "He'd eat us." After supper, Bradley and Brian went upstairs. Brian stepped into the bathroom, and Bradley went into the bedroom and picked up his book. "I can't wait for Thanksgiving," he said. "Only a few more days." "Me too," Brian said. He came out of the bathroom, wiping toothpaste off his chin. "Pumpkin pie, ice cream, mashed potatoes." He knelt in front of the window and looked outside. "Oh my gosh! Bradley, come and see!" Bradley jumped off his bed and knelt next to Brian. The dead tree was hidden from sight. The neighbors had draped a huge blue tarp around the tree. The tarp hung from the branches all the way to the ground. It was like a big blue tent with a tree inside. Suddenly a light went on inside the tarp, making it glow. Mr. and Mrs. Sargent were in there. Bradley could see their shapes moving around. "I don't think they're building a swimming pool," Brian whispered. "And they're not making a garden either," Bradley said. "So what are they doing?" "What if Mr. and Mrs. Sargent are spies?" Brian whispered. "Or bank robbers. Maybe they're burying money that they stole in their latest robbery. We need to get inside that tarp." "We?" Bradley said. "Yeah, you, me, Lucy, and Nate," Brian said. "Let's call them." Lucy Armstrong was the cousin of Josh's friend Dink. She was staying with Dink's family for a year while her parents worked on a Native American reservation in Arizona. Nate's older sister, Ruth Rose, was Josh's other best friend. His family lived next door to Dink, so all the kids were friends. Bradley looked at the clock. "It's too late to call," he said, "but we'll see them tomorrow morning at school." He changed into his pajamas. "There is something weird about our new neighbors," Brian said, "and we're going to find out what." Bradley fell asleep thinking about what could be going on inside the strange blue tarp. He dreamed that he was climbing over the fence to get a closer look. Suddenly, the giant black dog appeared out of the night. It leaped on Bradley and started to. Bradley woke up screaming. "It's only a nightmare," he whispered to himself. But it had seemed so real. Bradley closed his eyes and thought about Thanksgiving, pumpkin pie, and ice cream. Finally, he went back to sleep. Thank you. Be sure to tune in next week for chapters 3 and 4. Goodbye.